also, David, thank you so much for all of that. I'm hugely grateful. And it does segue beautifully into some work that Berry and I are starting certainly to think out loud about. And one of those things that David, I know you have really interesting views on this as well, is it useful, given that at the coalface, in the heat of battle, or in possibly the calmness of a consulting room, and Ashik, I don't know if it is actually that calm or not, you'd have to keep me right on that steer, that is there room in busy heads in frantic delivery of health and social care for the development of a model around values-based practice decision making that would act as a guide or a steer in order to support your conversation? And I'm going to hand over to Berrien because she's much more articulate in this than I am, but is that something that this group, the group of people who have come to talk about this, to be part of this conversation, is this the starting point for thinking out loud about the development of a model that would allow an aid memoir a space of thinking? So in the analogy I gave earlier around that rehearsal of conversation where decisions were made without the conversation with a patient, even though we understand what person-centered care is there space in this world to have a model in the background, in your head, around these are the things that I should be hitting on in that conversation? So just to have that out there for a second, I'm going to hand over to Berrien for your take on this, Berrien.
Thanks. So we're just going to share a few thoughts and ideas for us to discuss, dismiss, take forward. So a model, the developing of a model or a lens could underpin and enhance the shared decision-making process. A model can be a useful tool in codifying, clarifying, and showing the connection between the different elements in the delivery of person-centered health and social care. We should suggest looking at a 5-principle or 5-value in-action model based on the Collaborating Centre logo that will guide and enhance values-based interprofessional collaborative practice. And we suggested 5 C's, and they're in alphabetical order: collaboration, continuity, commitment, compassion, and communication. So that's 5 C's: collaboration, continuity, commitment, compassion, and communication. And as we were having some pre-webinar discussions, Ashok thought that he might find that useful and would apply that to his practice. Where is your go-to place in that moment of acute decision-making, clinical decision-making? How do you maintain the 2 feet approach? And an inner triangle of 3 values might be helpful in that space of collaboration, compassion, and communication. Those values can support conversations that happen at that acute moment. Following on, if we look at developing a lens that could be an enabling tool, we could look at the potential to develop competencies and skills for the 5 C's, particularly important when considering complex and conflicting values such as needs, wishes, and preferences. The lens would also be useful for an interprofessional clinical team. There's a risk of assuming that team members share the same values. Underlying differences not recognized may result in miscommunication, unexplained disagreements, and failure to make decisions. Developing a values perspective alongside knowledge and skills would be helpful in those situations as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Berrien. So this is probably now a question for this group, in that I certainly know that there are a few of us who are really interested in developing that model within that could be attached to the 5 points that Verian's just mentioned on the values-based practice logo, and using that 5 C's approach. But what we don't want to do is speak for you, and neither should we. So with your permission, and please indicate your preference in the chat, that what we would like to do is to invite participants from today to a further conversation for a roundtable development meeting, to look at the evidence, to look at what our thinking is around developing the 5 C's, but absolutely in tandem with the thinking about values-based practice and the collaborating centre. So I wonder if I can just pose that question to the room then. Would you like to have a further conversation to develop this work with us? So Benny and I believe Ashik as well, and Stephanie, I'm going to be as bold as to speak for you too, that the 5 C's are completely in tandem with our values around what conversations and decisions with patients and service users and people around us should be. So can